talk sessions. We're super happy we're all here. And Ian Oswald will talk about how to review notebooks with the NDime package. And Ian, your 5 minutes have just started. Oh, that's this one. Your time
Does this work? You can hear me? Yeah? Good. Perfect. Hands up if you use Jupyter Notebooks. Hands up if diffing them with different versions is easy. There we go, right. Diffing your Jupyter Notebook is hard. A Jupyter Notebook is a collection of, is a JSON document containing code and visual output, so text output and graphical output, with a lot of metadata, like the timestamp when cells are being run, which sequence each cell is in. If you run the same cell many times, it says that it's cell 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it counts up. So if you run the same code multiple times with the same output, you will have different notebooks due to the metadata alone. And if you generate different graphical output, the graphical output might render slightly differently, especially between different machines for the same code. So you end up with different binary being encoded in the document. And if you try to do a diff using the diff tool, you get that kind of rubbish being shown on screen, which is the encoding of an image inside this JSON file. When you've got 200 cells, lots of images inside it, everything gets terribly confused and your diff output goes on for pages and pages. You can't make any sense of it and you hate it. Wouldn't it be nice if we had a nice diffing tool? One of your options is to use Jupyter NB Convert and then export the notebook to a Python file. And then you've got 2 Python files for 2 different versions of your Git code. And you can use a regular text-based diff, but then you lose your graphical output. What we get with NBDime is a browser. This is not my project, this is one that I've started using. We get an in-browser graphical diff. It will highlight differences in the code and it will highlight differences in the visual output. So you can do this code diffing in your web browser, nice and easy. Because NBDime understands all of the metadata in the Jupyter Notebook, you can use it at the command line as well, and then you'll do diffing as you would at the command line, but it will strip out all of the metadata, and it will do things like summarize the binary output from the base64 encoding and snip it to one line rather than many pages, and it will summarize figures, and it will summarize code diffs, and you get the different code that's relevant in different colors on one line, all at the command line. And it goes all the way through to having a 3-way merge diff tool inside the web browser. So everything that you're expecting to do with code inside PyCharm or whichever version control system you've been using in the past, you can do now in Jupyter Notebook in the web browser. I started using it recently for a 200-cell notebook. It just works. It's brilliant. Made my life really easy. And I could compare diffs from a remote team member and my own, even though a lot of the notebook had been modified. I was really happy with that. I remember seeing a couple of years ago, it's come on a lot in the meantime. I'm just super happy that it just worked. And I thought it was worth sharing that because it might make your life easy as well. That's it. Thank you very much.
Right, thanks. Yeah, so text depersonalization. We started this conference with a talk on GDPR about personal data and how we have to be careful with that. And this is also an issue with text. So where I work at KPN, we get a lot of incoming text data. Customers chat with us with our customer service. They call us and we can then do speech to text on that. Or they email us, all this kind of stuff, and they tell us a lot about themselves. They often tell us what their name is, what their phone number is, where they live, what their bank account number is. And yeah, we have to be very careful with this information because this puts a lot of constraints on what we can do with it, where we can store it, how long we can store it, etc. And actually, for a lot of the things we want to do with that, for our analysis, for our modeling, we don't really care about this personal data. If we're trying to classify what your problem was, we don't care much what your name was or where you live. So it might be a good idea to put something in between there that kind of filters out all this personal data, so that we are, as analysts, are much safer when we're working with this data. So that's what I'll be talking about. We built a little package, Python package called deperson, and essentially it works like this. So if you want to remove stuff from text, there's essentially 2 ways you can do that. You can blacklist everything that you think is bad, or you can whitelist everything that you think is good. We started with blacklisting because it's kind of the easy thing to start with. You try to recognize numbers and names and this kind of stuff. But there's a lot of problems because you need to know exactly what all the stuff is that you want to block. And these lists will never be exhaustive, so you're always going to have problems with stuff slipping through. So in the end, we actually went for whitelisting because it's safer. But you do have other challenges there because you need a full list of all the words in the language that you want to let through. In something like Dutch, for instance, you have compound words which are difficult. You have a lot of domain-specific words, and people might misspell words, etc. So this is all going to be caught if you're whitelisting. The first problem is where do I actually find a whitelist that describes, say, the Dutch language? It was not so easy. I Googled, but I couldn't find one, so I was like, okay, where do I get this? But then I realized if I just start on my computer, it actually knows pretty well what Dutch is. If I just open my word processor and I type in something that says in Dutch, my name is Jakub and my SIM card's been blocked, it understands very, very well that that name is not a Dutch word and that this has been misspelled. Because it has spell checker. So couldn't we use that to do depersonalization? Because the problem is very much related. So I figured out how does LibreOffice in this case do this, and it has something underneath called Hunspell, which is the spell checker for Thunderbird, Firefox, etc. And it essentially comes with two files. One file with a list of like stem words, which all have a bunch of flags, and then a file that defines what all these flags mean. So for example, this helps you understand that if you have the word beer, this YA flag tells you that you can make that into biertje. And so with this, you can understand you can reverse engineer this to get a whole list of all the Dutch words all the words in the Dutch language. And then we add some domain-specific words like KPN, which a dictionary doesn't know, and we need some slang because a lot of people, when they're chatting, they don't write Dutch very well. And then, yeah, we have our whitelist, and we can do what we set out to do, which is depersonalize the text. So anything that's not in our whitelist, we filter it out. And then with Hunspell, there's a couple of other cool things. It has a Python wrapper, so you can run your words through that if you're not sure about them to, for example, deal with this problem with compound words. Dutch is a language where you have compound words. You can concatenate words forever and make new words. So actually, an exhaustive list of Dutch words is not possible. But Hunspell has the rules for this concatenation, and you can just run your words through there if you're not sure. We also did some autocorrection on misspelling. A lot of people were having problems spelling the word abonnement in Dutch. You can see all the variants. These were very common, so we do some autocorrection here. Yeah, so we wrap this all up in a little package. It works, it's really simple. It gives you a class called deperson. You can apply various parts of the package to your text, and this is what you get. My name is Peter, blah, 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 and it filters out the name, the email, the postal code, phone number, etc. And the idea is to have this on GitHub pretty soon. We're not quite there yet, but it will be on the KPN Data Science Lab GitHub, so look out for that if you're interested.
Exactly. So my name is Almar Klein, and I'm here to tell you that WebAssembly is awesome. So out of curiosity, how many of you have heard of WebAssembly before? And who of you know what WebAssembly is? So I have work to do. Okay, so WebAssembly is an open standard for executable code, and it's being developed by people from Google, Microsoft, Apple, Mozilla, so basically everyone is involved to make this happen. It's a very compact binary format, so it's very memory efficient, but it also has a textual human-readable representation, and there's a one-to-one relationship to it, so you can always convert one into the other, which is great for things like debugging. WebAssembly is also fast. It's a very low-level format, as the name might suggest, but it's just high-level enough so that it can represent platform-agnostic code. And that means that it's relatively easy to convert WebAssembly into actual machine code. And yeah, the code that will then run is also very fast. It's also safe. It needs to run in the web, so it's safe. And many of you may not know, but it already works in all major web browsers. Actually, it has been working in all major web browsers for almost a year. So you can actually already play with it. And several other communities, like the Rust community, and several others are embracing WebAssembly to move to the web. So people are coding apps in Rust and running them in the browser, for instance. Of course, for Python, we cannot really do it that way because Python is interpreted, but there's other ways that we can use it, I think. So another thing that's good to know, that's WebAssembly is not limited to the web. It's initially designed for the web, but you can just as well use it as an intermediate representation for representing executable code in a platform agnostic way for desktop or mobile applications eventually. So my question, something that I've been asking myself, but I also want to ask to you, what will we do with WebAssembly? So how can we make use of WebAssembly, but also what role can Python play as WebAssembly becomes more popular? Because it will. So some of the things that I've been doing myself, together with Wendel Bouwman, we've created some tools to work with WebAssembly in Python. We've done this inside the PPCI project, which is a pure Python compiler infrastructure. And with functionality to read, write, and inspect Python WebAssembly modules. So we can actually load a module, inspect it to see what imports it requires, and also what functions it exports. And we can actually compile the WebAssembly module into executable machine code. We can execute it inside the same Python process, and we can have the WebAssembly module call back into Python functions. And that opens up a lot of cool possibilities once it eventually works reliably. We just started it, but in short, WebAssembly is awesome. It's going to come, and it's going to be awesome, and we need to think about what we're going to do. And if you're interested, come talk to me. Thanks.
So I wanted to give a very quick lightning talk about something that you might have noticed around the edges that I've been doing this weekend and that Ian has been joining me in doing this weekend. Just to introduce ourselves, I'm James, I'm from NumFOCUS. At the end of the lightning talks, before the closing notes, I'll tell you a little bit more about NumFOCUS and how PyData Amsterdam fits into the global PyData community. Ian is one of the chairs of PyData London and one of the leaders in this community. And one of the things we've been doing this weekend is trying to remove barriers to contributing to open source. So some of you were in the session that we did in the green room earlier, in which Ian helped a couple people with their first open source contribution. If you want to talk about that briefly.
So at PyData London and a couple of previous conferences, I've been building up this idea of a short session, 30 minutes, making your first open source contribution. So not checking out code and getting pandas running on your machine in a full development environment and then editing the code and then following the committer requirements to get it back and committed, but instead working in the GitHub web interface to fix some documentation typos in a project. So a super simple thing you can do from your own web login. You make a change, you do a pull request back to the project owner, they accept it, the documentation gets rebuilt, and then the typos you fixed are clearly available online straight away. So this morning we fixed 2 one-word typos, trivial little jobs to do, but for 2 people who hadn't done that before, and then the documentation was live afterwards on the TDDA project, and it was accepted back by my collaborator Nick back in Edinburgh within minutes of the those pushes being made. So that was really nice just to get some people making their first contributions to the open source world. We did it in London and elsewhere before, and I want to do more of that.
So beyond just the technical mechanisms of making an open source contribution, we really want to address everything that stops any one of you from making a contribution. We did a Git workshop right afterwards in which we talked about certain things, problems people run into with Git. We ran out of time, but we were going to go into ways that we can use Git and GitHub more effectively. And this is one other technical barrier. But I wanted to share with you, with the remaining few seconds that I have, a story about my life in making an open source contribution, and something that I know a lot of you face, and one of the other non-technical reasons that we need to focus so heavily on removing these barriers. So, you know, I'm vice president at NumFOCUS. I've been to a lot of PyData events. I've spoken. I even have my own open source project. It's called GMPy. It's an open source mesh optical route planning tool. It's one of the first tools of its kind in that industry. I'm actually on this tool as the main technical contributor, telling participants from companies like Orange and Facebook and academic institutions like University of Torino how to build industrial grade software. And yet, sometimes when I can try to contribute something, sometimes when I have a bug fix, I'm kind of nervous about it. So here's a bug fix that I did late last year, or early last year rather, and I found a little bug in a library called Curio, and I put it on, and I said, it's driven by a stupid example. I kind of put myself down when I was doing it. And Nathaniel Smith, who's one of the core developers for NumPy, actually saw this before the owner of this project saw it, and he said, oh, do you have an example? And I tried to put myself down again, saying, oh, don't worry if I'm wrong about this. And at the end, an interesting thing happened where he said, oh, I only just realized it's you, James. Which on the one hand kind of makes you feel good. On the other hand, you're like, well, I kind of hope that everybody who's on the project gets treated with the same niceness. It's not just because you know that person that they're treated nicely. And one interesting thing that happened was in the development of this library, I decided, my own library, I decided maybe we need to add something to NumPy. And so I tweeted at Nathaniel, whom I've seen many times since, and I was like, does it make sense to add DB to Lin and Lin to DB to NumPy? I know that scipy.constants has lambda to new and new to lambda, and these would be helper functions. And Nathaniel says to me, I don't know, ask the mailing list. And my response is, I don't want them to be mean to me. Because sometimes you say, hey, why don't we do this? And the response is, you're the stupidest person I ever saw. Don't do this. I hate you. And it really puts you down. And even for somebody who knows a lot of the core contributors, who's part of this community, who has their own open source library, even I sometimes worry about being yelled at. And this is one other mechanism that we need to address in clearing the barriers for you. So what I want you to do as a call to action is tweet at me, tweet at Ian. What can we do to clear any barriers that sit between you and contribution to an open source library? Is it about technology? Is it about GitHub? Or is it about just making it so that you feel comfortable telling somebody, you know what, I use this, I think it could be better. Let us know, and let's see if we can use PyData as a mechanism to introduce more of you to open source and the contribution side of it. Thank you.
So I have a confession to make before going to the talk. So I guess many people use Twitter here, right? So this is a talk that was given earlier today. And so I want to listen to that talk again or just go through the PPT again. So I'm going to like this tweet. And then right after I read that tweet or read the presentation, I'm going to unlike it. Because I use Twitter likes as a bookmark feature, which is kind of bad, but I'm sorry. That's what I do. So I'm a inbox zero kind of guy. So coming to the presentation, it's related. I'm going to come to that. So similarly, GitHub, right? So GitHub has this star feature, and I want to click this star button. Like I like pandas. I guess everyone likes it here. It's PyData anyway. So I want to click that star button, but at the same time, I don't want this number to go up because I use my star repo list as a bookmark feature again. I want to keep going through that list. Okay, there are so many interesting people, wonderful people who create awesome repos. Like it can be blog posts or it can be tools, etc. So I want to star them and I want to go back to them, see what kind of wonderful things are there in the world. But at the same time, I don't want to click star, which I know that I know pandas. I don't want to go through the pandas again. So I want to click star, but I don't want, at the same time, I don't want to click the star. So what do? So that's basically my objective. So if I can categorize GitHub repos into smaller lists, and so that it's manageable for me to actually go through that list, even though I have let's say 1,000 GitHub start repos, right? So that's where the project is. So can we use topic modeling, latent direct allocation to do this? At its basic, we can kind of start with this analogy. Think of a bimodal distribution, and you can separate this bimodal distribution into two distributions, and you can sum it up with different weights. So the hypothesis behind topic modeling is each topic is a set of word distributions, and there are different topics in any document. So the idea is you can divide a document into a set of topics with distribution of topics for a document. So workflow, GitHub has a very easy to use API, and there are Python clients for that. So you get the readmes from each GitHub repo and use regex, Spacy. So Spacy is a NLP tool like NLP kit, which you can use to tokenize, lemmatize, stem the text, and then finally we use sklearn, scikit-learn to do latent direct allocation. So yeah, since this is a lightning talk, just a very small set of results. So this is one topic that I found just earlier today. Awesome. So what is the topic here? I guess it's awesome and it's a list. So all of these are lists. Awesome Linux software, awesome computer vision, awesome semantic segmentation, and so on. So I guess topic modeling works. And something that I proved. So, and this is the output that you get. For each GitHub repo, you get the list of topics and the corresponding probabilities, not probabilities, more like proportion of topics in that document. So then so one thing, so I got to this list by just sorting on each topic. So one topic was this. But what we can do in addition to that is use the table, add additional features. So GitHub right now actually allows you to add tags, custom tags. And so you can add that as a feature. And maybe I want to add the language of the repo as a feature, like Python or R, and so on. And that's it. And finally, yeah. So why topic modeling? Instead, why not use Dr. right? So obviously, deep learning FTW. So yeah, for the win. So that's it. Thanks.
Online shopping is fun, as everybody knows, if it's fashion. Online shopping is boring if it's grocery, because it's time consuming, it's buying the same stuff all over and over again. And we predict that in the next 10 years, about 1/3 of the grocery shopping will be done online. So that's quite a big challenge for us, and we want to predict what will be the next basket. What I'm going to do, I'm going to invite you to a hackathon end of June, the last Friday of June at our office in Ice Mobile. We will have a retailer data set containing transactional data where you can show your machine learning skills. And the assignment is to predict the next shopping baskets of each customer. To make it easy, because it's just a day, we will have a notebook ready with you with a baseline model, which will be just the last basket, including a F1 scoring function and also a submission function to our leaderboard. So then you can go crazy with modeling. We will have servers for you, GPUs, and in the lunch break, we have a Pecha workshop as an extra. Then we will have a jury from industry, from Albert Heijn, Brandrolti, and Ice Mobile. And you can win awesome prizes. And you don't see the pictures here because they're far off. But it will be at least a trip in a self-driving boat from Xomnia. There will be also vouchers from Albert Heijn to do shopping and other stuff. You can't see the date now, so put it here. This is our team. This is the QR code if you are interested. And you can just register at Eventbrite. It would be nice if you come. Many challenges there. Thank you.
Usually we have to clap people away. We didn't have to do that this year. So these were the lightning talk speakers. So please give one final round for all of them.